I still remember that night. The cold concrete under my knees, the blood on my hands, and the door slamming shut behind me. My husband had just thrown me out, his mother's voice still echoing in my ears, telling him to teach me a lesson. 8 months pregnant, clutching my stomach, I dialed 911 with trembling fingers, praying my babies would survive. I didn't know it then, but that call would expose everything: their greed, their cruelty, and the truth that would change my life forever. Before we dive into the story, I want to know something from you. Which state or city in the US are you watching from? And what's the very first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word home? Tell me in the comments. I love reading your answers before the story begins. Hello, my name is Marian, and I'm 28 years old. When I look back at the first months of my married life in Charlotte, North Carolina, everything still feels warm and quiet, like a snapshot from a happier time. The sunny streets, the sound of car engines from the workshop where my husband Darren worked, and the evening smell of coffee that always filled our tiny apartment. Those little things made our life feel complete. We didn't own much, but we had each other, and that felt enough. Darren was an auto mechanic, grease on his hands and gentleness in his voice. He'd come home tired but still make jokes while washing his hands in the sink, and I'd laugh, feeling lucky to have a man who understood how to work hard and love deeply. We had married for love, not money. My parents, Patrick and Diana, had warned me that love alone doesn't fill a pantry, but they had still given their blessing. They loved Darren for his honesty and his effort to make something of himself. I was their only child, their pride and their weakness. Our home wasn't fancy, just a 2-bedroom brick house with old curtains and a small porch that my father painted every spring, but it was filled with laughter. When I moved out after the wedding, Mom cried softly in my arms and Dad tried to hide his tears behind a smile. I remember saying, "I'll visit every Sunday," and they both nodded, pretending to believe me even though we all knew life would soon get busy. The first few weeks of marriage were a dream. I decorated our little apartment with cheap flowers from the market and hung my mother's old curtains on the windows. Darren and I would sit on the couch after dinner and plan our future like 2 kids playing house. He wanted to open his own auto shop someday. I wanted a home big enough to fit a nursery. We talked about children, but never in numbers or dates, just as a hope we'd someday hold in our arms. Then, life changed faster than I could breathe. Barely a month after our wedding, my parents were in a car accident on their way home from church. One phone call split my world in half. I remember dropping the cup in my hand and hearing it shatter before the words even sank in. Darren held me as I collapsed, and I screamed until my throat burned. Patrick and Diana were gone the same day. The funeral was a blur of black coats, flowers, and the smell of rain. They left me their house, but I couldn't bear to enter it. In those days after, I clung to Darren like he was the only solid thing left. He kept telling me, "We'll get through this," and for a while I believed him. I thought love was enough to fill the silence that death had left behind. But I didn't know that this loss was just the beginning, that the next storms waiting in my life would come not from fate, but from the people who shared my home. When a few quiet months passed, the fog of grief began to lift. Darren had returned to his job at the auto shop, and I tried to fill my days with simple routines: cleaning, cooking, taking walks past the same park where we used to sit before marriage. One morning, I woke up feeling unusually dizzy. I brushed it off at first, thinking it was stress or exhaustion, but when the same thing happened again and again, a small spark of hope flickered inside me. I bought a pregnancy test from the pharmacy near our street, too nervous to even look at the box. I'll never forget that moment in the bathroom. The small plastic stick lay on the counter, 2 pink lines slowly appearing like a miracle unfolding. I sat down, shaking, pressing my hand over my stomach. Tears filled my eyes, tears that weren't from sadness this time. I was going to be a mother. I whispered to myself, "Mom, Dad, I wish you were here to see this." That evening, when Darren came home, I waited until he washed his hands and turned to face me. "Darren," I said softly, "you're going to be a dad." For a second, he just stared at me, frozen, as if the words hadn't reached him yet. Then his face broke into the biggest smile I'd ever seen. He lifted me off the ground, spinning me gently as I laughed and cried at the same time. "Are you serious?" he kept repeating, and I nodded through my tears. For a few days, the house felt alive again. Darren started talking about baby names, painting the spare room, and promising that he'd work extra hours. We even told a few close friends who congratulated us with hugs and smiles. But when his mother, Norma, and sister, Renee, heard the news, their reactions were nothing like we'd imagined. Norma frowned and muttered, "You two barely have enough saved. Why rush into this?" Renee smirked and said, "Guess who'll be paying for diapers now." I tried to smile politely, pretending their words didn't sting, but inside I felt small, like my happiness had been stepped on. Darren tried to defend me, telling them, "We'll manage," but I could see how quickly their voices could bend his confidence. Still, I refused to let their bitterness steal my joy. Every morning I'd place my hand on my belly, whispering to the tiny life growing inside me, "You are my hope." For now, I believed that love and a little courage would be enough to protect us. As the weeks passed, my body began to change. Every small ache, every flutter inside me reminded me that life was growing, fragile but strong. Yet the mood in the house was shifting. Darren was still kind, but I could feel the weight of responsibility starting to press on him. His mother, Norma, would often stop by unannounced, inspecting everything like she owned the place. She'd make comments such as, "You should save more," or, "Darren, you can't afford hospital bills on your salary." Her tone wasn't concern, it was control. Renee, on the other hand, treated pregnancy like gossip. She'd sit on the couch scrolling through her phone, saying things like, "Having a baby is cute, but have you seen how expensive formula is?" I tried to stay calm. My parents had taught me that silence was sometimes the best armor. But at night, I'd lie awake thinking about bills, rent, and the little life depending on me. That's when a quiet decision began to form inside my heart. I couldn't just depend on Darren's income. If I wanted security for my child, I had to create it myself. I started researching ways to earn from home. Late at night, when Darren fell asleep, I'd sit with my laptop, scrolling through articles about small businesses. I came across Etsy, a platform where people sold handmade and personalized items. I'd always loved crafts. My mother used to say I had gentle hands. That memory gave me courage. I decided to open an Etsy shop selling personalized baby items, tiny blankets, name-stitched bibs, and nursery decor. It felt poetic, creating things for other babies while waiting for my own. The beginning was tough. My hands trembled when I uploaded the first product photo. Days passed without a single order. I doubted myself more than once, but I kept going. Then one morning, my phone buzzed a notification, "You've made your first sale." I remember screaming Darren's name with pure excitement. For a brief moment, everything felt right again. He hugged me and said, "See? You're amazing." But Norma wasn't impressed. When she found out, she said sharply, "You're wasting time on childish crafts instead of resting." Renee laughed and said, "Guess she wants to be a businesswoman now." I smiled weakly, pretending their words didn't hurt, but deep inside, something awakened, a quiet fire that told me I could build my own path, no matter how small it started. That night, I sat by the window, my hand over my belly, whispering to my unborn child, "We'll be okay. Mama's learning how to fight softly." By the time I entered my 4th month of pregnancy, the air in our home had grown heavy, not from the summer heat outside, but from the invisible tension that kept spreading between Darren and me. He still smiled, still called me baby when he left for work, yet something in his eyes had changed. His mother, Norma, and sister, Renee, had started visiting almost every other day, bringing with them whispers and criticism disguised as advice. Norma would walk around the kitchen, pointing out small flaws like, "You shouldn't eat this. It'll make you gain too much weight," or, "You really should let Darren handle the finances now that you're emotional." Renee, with her loud chewing gum and glossy nails, would giggle and say, "Mom's right. You don't want him thinking you're too bossy." Their words were like poison, slow and subtle, and I could feel them wrapping around Darren's mind. He started coming home later, smelling faintly of beer, claiming he had to help a friend at the shop. The warmth between us was fading, replaced by short, tired conversations. When I'd tell him about a new Etsy order or a good customer review, he'd nod distractedly, saying, "That's nice," without looking up from his phone. Sometimes I'd catch him staring blankly, as if wondering when his life had become this complicated. Then came the doctor's appointment that changed everything. Darren joined me that day, though reluctantly. As the ultrasound screen flickered, the doctor smiled and said, "Congratulations, you're having twins." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 2 heartbeats echoed in the small room, fast and beautiful. My eyes filled with tears. Darren squeezed my hand, smiling nervously, but I could feel his fingers go stiff. When we returned home, I was still glowing with excitement, but Norma's reaction was cruelly different. "2 babies," she exclaimed, her voice sharp. "Do you even realize what that means? Double expenses, double trouble." Renee gasped dramatically and added, "Wow, you two can barely handle rent." I tried to stay calm, telling them, "We'll manage," but Norma scoffed. "Manage? You can't rely on luck forever, Marion. Stop living in dreams." That night, Darren was silent during dinner. Finally, he said, "Maybe Mom's right. Maybe you should slow down on this online stuff and focus on the babies. We can't risk anything." I stared at him, confused and hurt. "Darren, this shop is helping us," I said softly. "These small earnings are keeping us stable." But he didn't meet my eyes. Over the next few weeks, the divide grew wider. Norma made sure her words reached me through Darren. Renee often mocked me on social media, posting vague captions like, "Some people think they're business queens when they can't even cook dinner right." I never replied, but my silence made them bolder. Still, I refused to break. Every time they tried to push me down, I reminded myself that I had 2 little hearts depending on me. I began to save small amounts from each sale secretly, putting them in a separate envelope hidden inside my journal. I didn't know what I was saving for, only that something told me I'd need it one day. The next 2 months brought both light and darkness into my life. My Etsy store began to bloom like a garden I had planted with trembling hands. Each day, new orders appeared in my inbox. Blankets embroidered with names like Liam or Sophie, tiny bibs with pastel letters that read Mommy's Miracle. Customers started leaving glowing reviews. One woman even messaged, "Your work made my baby shower special." Those words felt like medicine to my tired heart. For the first time since my parents' death, I felt capable, not just a wife or a daughter, but a woman who could build something on her own. Yet at home, Darren was falling apart. He complained about long hours, difficult clients, and never getting ahead. He came home late, sometimes with oil still on his clothes and anger in his voice. When I suggested he rest or eat, he'd snap, "You don't understand how hard I work." I stayed quiet, thinking silence was safer than arguing. But the truth was, his mother's voice had become the echo in his head. Norma visited constantly, bringing meals I didn't ask for, rearranging the house as if she lived there. "You shouldn't tire yourself," she'd say, her tone sweet but sharp. "Darren works enough for both of you." The irony made me want to laugh because, in reality, it was my Etsy earnings paying the bills now. Darren had started missing shifts at the shop, claiming he was burned out. Eventually, his boss let him go. The day he told me, his voice was flat. "They don't appreciate loyalty," he muttered, slamming his keys on the table. I swallowed my worry. "It's okay," I said gently. "Maybe this is a sign. You can find something better." But Norma, who was visiting that evening, seized the moment. "Or maybe your wife's online hobby distracted you," she said coldly. Darren's face darkened. "It's not a hobby." I tried to defend myself, but he raised his hand slightly, not to hit, just to silence me. "Don't start," he warned. Days turned into weeks. The bills kept coming, and it was my money that kept the lights on. I never threw it in his face, but he could see the truth. Each package I mailed out, each PayPal notification on my phone, it bruised his pride. He stopped thanking me for dinner, stopped noticing when I smiled. Sometimes I'd find him sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. Renee didn't help either. She'd show up uninvited, talking loudly about her nights out, dropping hints that some men can't handle strong women. Darren would sit silently, jaw tight. I could see the resentment in his eyes building like a storm. Despite everything, I kept working. I told myself I was doing it for our future, for the babies growing inside me. But deep down, I was starting to understand something painful. My success didn't make Darren proud anymore. It made him feel small. And a man who feels small will do almost anything to feel powerful again. It was a cool, cloudy morning in late October when everything began to change. I was 7 months pregnant now, my belly large and heavy, my movements slower, but my determination stronger than ever. I had just finished packing a few Etsy orders when, on my way to the post office, I stopped by a small gas station. It was one of those ordinary corners in Charlotte, the kind people pass every day without noticing, but that morning something about it caught my attention. Inside, a bright poster read, "Powerball Jackpot, $750,000. I smiled faintly. It sounded absurd, yet strangely hopeful. Maybe it was the hormones, or maybe just a tired dream, but I thought about what that money could mean. A bigger home, better doctors for the babies, a life where I wouldn't have to beg for security. I used $2 from my small cash envelope, the same one where I secretly saved from Etsy sales, and bought a single Powerball ticket. The cashier handed it to me with a grin. "Good luck, ma'am," he said, and I tucked it safely into my purse, half embarrassed that I'd even bought it. Days passed, and I forgot about it, until one evening, as I folded tiny baby clothes, I heard the TV host announce the winning numbers. The sound barely registered at first. I almost changed the channel, but something made me pause. I reached for my purse, pulled out the wrinkled ticket, and compared it to the numbers flashing on the screen. One by one, they matched. My hands began to tremble. "No, this can't be," I whispered, pressing the ticket closer. All the numbers, every single one, were identical. I sat frozen, heart pounding so hard it hurt. "Oh my God," I gasped. I won. In that exact moment, I didn't hear Renee walking into the living room. She had come by unannounced again, probably to raid the fridge or gossip with her mother on the phone. She froze when she saw me staring at the screen, the ticket shaking in my hands. "What's that?" she asked, her tone instantly suspicious. I tried to stay calm. "It's just a lottery ticket," I murmured. Her eyes widened as she stepped closer, watching the TV. "Wait, those are the winning numbers," she said, her voice rising. I felt panic rush through me. "Renee, please don't." But she was already smiling in disbelief, pulling out her phone. "Oh, Mom is going to love this." Within an hour, Norma and Darren were in the living room. Darren's face was pale, with a strange mix of excitement and greed. Norma looked like she had found buried treasure. "You bought this without telling us?" she snapped. I swallowed hard. "It was just for fun. I didn't expect." Norma cut me off. "You have no idea what to do with this kind of money. You'll waste it." Darren added, "You should give it to me. I'll handle everything." I shook my head, my voice trembling but firm. "No. This money is for our children, for their future." Their expressions changed instantly. Norma's eyes hardened, Renee's smirk returned, and Darren clenched his fists. I felt the walls closing in, but I stood my ground. That night, as I lay in bed with the ticket hidden beneath my pillow, I felt a strange mix of fear and triumph. I had won something that could change our lives forever. But deep down, I sensed that this victory would soon turn into the most dangerous storm of my life. The next morning started in silence, but I could feel the tension crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. Darren didn't go to work. He sat at the table, pretending to read a newspaper that hadn't been opened. Norma was in the kitchen making coffee she didn't intend to drink, and Renee scrolled on her phone, eyes darting toward me every few seconds. I knew they'd been talking, plotting maybe, and my chest tightened with every passing minute. After breakfast, Darren finally broke the silence. Where's the ticket, Marion? He asked, his tone calm but cold. I froze, setting down my cup. It's safe, I said carefully. I'll claim it after the babies are born. His jaw tightened. Why wait? You think I don't know how to handle money? It's not that, I said softly. I want to plan properly. We need time. Norma laughed bitterly from behind him. Time? Or are you planning to keep it for yourself? I looked at her, my voice trembling. This money belongs to our family. It's for the children. Renee leaned forward, smirking. Funny, you say our but mean yours. Their words stabbed through me. Please, I said, my hand instinctively resting on my belly. I don't want to fight. I just want what's best for the babies. But Norma's voice grew louder, sharper. You've turned my son against his own blood. You're poisoning him with your independence. Darren slammed his hand on the table. Enough, he shouted, but the anger wasn't at them. It was at me. Give me the ticket, Marion. Tears welled in my eyes. No. This money is the only chance we have for a better life. You'd spend it in a week, Darren, and you know it. That was all it took. His face twisted with rage. Before I could move, he struck me across the face, a hard, violent slap that made my vision blur. I stumbled backward, hitting the corner of the table. Pain shot through my abdomen, and a terrified cry escaped my throat. Darren, please. But he wasn't listening. His mother screamed, "Teach her a lesson," and Renee blocked the door, her phone still in her hand, recording everything like it was entertainment. Darren grabbed my arm, yanking me forward. You think you're smarter than me? You think you can hide from me? He hissed. I'm pregnant. I cried, clutching my stomach. Please stop. But my words only fueled his fury. He shoved me again. This time, I fell hard, my side hitting the wooden floor. A sharp pain ripped through my body, and I felt something wet between my legs. Panic flooded my mind. My babies. I had to protect them. As Darren leaned over me, yelling, my gaze darted to the coffee table. My phone was there. It must have fallen earlier. Every ounce of strength left in me pushed through the pain. When Norma shouted for him to grab the ticket from the bedroom, Darren turned away for a split second. I stretched my arm and dragged the phone toward me, hiding it under my dress. Then, just as I tried to stand, Norma and Renee grabbed me by the hair. I screamed in agony as they pulled, dragging me toward the door. Get out, Norma shouted. You ungrateful witch. They opened the door and threw me outside into the cold. I hit the porch steps, barely able to move. Through the blur of tears, I saw Renee snatch the envelope from my purse, the envelope that held the winning ticket. Darren took it, his hands shaking, his eyes empty. For a second, I thought he might look back, that maybe, just maybe, he'd realize what he'd done. But he didn't. They slammed the door, locking it behind me. I sat there, bleeding, shaking, my breath shallow. My world had shattered, but one small piece of hope still flickered. My phone. Somehow, miraculously, it was still in my grasp. With trembling fingers, I pressed 911. When the operator answered, I whispered, Please help me. My husband hit me. I'm 8 months pregnant. She told me to stay where I was. Help was on the way. I clutched my belly, whispering to my babies, Hold on. Mama's here. Don't leave me yet. The night air was cold against my skin as I sat on the porch steps, my breath short and shallow. Every second felt longer than the last. My body ached, and warm blood trickled down my leg, but I refused to close my eyes. The sound of sirens in the distance felt like a promise, a fragile thread pulling me toward safety. I whispered to my unborn babies again and again, Hold on, please, hold on. Red and blue lights finally flashed across the front yard. 2 police cruisers pulled up, followed by an ambulance. An officer rushed toward me, a tall man with kind eyes. Ma'am, don't move, he said gently, kneeling beside me. We've got you. What's your name? Marion, I gasped. My husband. He hit me. I'm 8 months pregnant. They threw me out. He nodded, signaling the paramedics forward. All right, Marion. You're safe now. We're going to get you to the hospital. Another officer ran to the house, pounding on the door, shouting, "Charlotte PD, open up." But no one answered. The house was silent. Darren, Norma, and Renee had already fled, taking the ticket with them. As the paramedics lifted me onto a stretcher, the pain in my stomach grew unbearable. I screamed, clutching the rails. "Easy," one of them said. "Stay with me. Breathe in, breathe out. You're strong, just breathe." Inside the ambulance, they hooked up in 4 and placed a monitor on my belly. I could hear 2 faint, rapid heartbeats. One of the paramedics smiled faintly. "Your babies are fighting, just like you." At the hospital, the bright lights and quick movements blurred together. Nurses swarmed around me, checking vitals, calling out numbers. A doctor appeared, calm and focused. "We need to deliver now," he said. "She's going into labor." Everything after that moved in flashes. The oxygen mask, the sting of an injection, the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then, a cry thin but alive. One, then another. I turned my head weakly toward the sound, tears spilling down my cheeks. "They're okay?" I whispered. The doctor smiled. "Both boys are healthy. Small, but strong." I reached out, trembling, as a nurse brought one baby close enough for me to see. His tiny fingers curled instinctively around mine. "Hi," I whispered. "I'm your mom." Hours later, as I lay in the recovery room, a police officer came to take my statement. He spoke softly, careful not to disturb the sleeping babies beside me. "We've issued alerts," he said. "They won't get far. We'll find them, and your lottery ticket too." I nodded weakly, exhausted but grateful. The hospital room was quiet except for the gentle beeping of monitors and the slow rhythm of my son's breathing. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of peace, not because everything was fixed, but because I had survived. I had my children. Before the officer left, I whispered, "Please make sure they pay for what they did." He nodded firmly. "They will, Marion. I promise." The following days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and quiet determination. The hospital had become both my refuge and my courtroom, a place where I tried to heal my body while giving voice to what had been done to me. Each morning, a nurse would check my vitals, the baby's heartbeats, and then leave me alone with my thoughts. Every time I looked at my sons sleeping in their bassinets, I whispered, "You are why I'm still here." On the 3rd day, the police returned with news. Officer Grant, the same kind-eyed man who had first found me, walked in holding a folder. "We've located them," he said. My heart jumped. "Where?" "They tried to cash the lottery ticket at the North Carolina Education Lottery Center," he explained. The clerk recognized the description we gave and stalled them until officers arrived. "All 3 are in custody." Relief washed over me, but it came with tears. I wasn't crying for them. I was crying for the pieces of myself they had broken. "What about the ticket?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "It's safe," he said. "It'll be returned to you after the court process." A few days later, a detective visited me to record a formal statement. I told them everything, every word Norma had said, every shove, every slap, and how Darren's rage had nearly killed me and our babies. I spoke slowly, sometimes stopping to wipe my tears, but I didn't hold back. "They took everything from me," I said, "but they won't take my voice." The legal process moved quickly because of the evidence, the bruises, hospital reports, and Renee's own foolish video recording of the assault, which she had uploaded to her cloud. It was undeniable proof. The prosecutor assured me that the state would handle everything as a case of aggravated assault, theft, and domestic violence. When I was discharged, I went back to my parents' old house. It felt strange stepping inside after so long. The rooms were silent, but somehow comforting, like my parents' presence lingered in the walls, giving me strength. I set up a small nursery in my old bedroom, painted it light blue, and placed the twins' cribs side by side. Late one evening, as I rocked one of my babies to sleep, I got a call from Officer Grant. "The court hearing is scheduled," he said. "They'll face charges soon." "You did the right thing, Marion." I looked at my sons, their tiny chests rising and falling peacefully, and whispered, Now justice will begin. Not just for me, but for them too. The courtroom smelled of wood polish and tension. I wasn't physically there. The doctors had advised against traveling with 2 newborns, so I sat in my parents' living room in Charlotte, facing a laptop screen. The babies slept nearby, wrapped in soft blankets, as my lawyer adjusted the camera. My hands trembled slightly, but I held my chin high. For the first time in months, I wasn't a victim. I was a mother seeking justice. The judge, an older man with a calm but firm tone, began the proceedings. The defendants, Darren, Norma, and Renee, appeared on the court's video feed, each in handcuffs. Seeing them again sent a chill through me. Darren's once familiar face looked cold and hollow, Norma's arrogance was gone, and Renee looked pale, her eyes darting nervously. The prosecutor presented everything: my medical records, police photos, and, most damning of all, Renee's own recording of the attack. Watching that video play on the screen made my stomach twist. The sound of my own cries filled the courtroom, and even through the laptop speakers, I could hear the gasps from those present. When it was my turn to speak, my voice shook, but I didn't stop. "Your Honor," I said, "I lost my parents, I lost my home, and almost lost my children. All because of their greed. I don't want revenge. I just want safety. I want my sons to grow up in a world where no woman has to beg for protection." The judge listened quietly, then nodded to the prosecutor. After deliberation, the verdict was announced. Darren, guilty of aggravated assault, domestic violence, and grand larceny. Sentence: 12 years in state prison and a $25,000 fine. Norma, guilty of conspiracy and aiding assault. Sentence: 8 years in prison and 5 years probation after release, with mandatory anger management counseling. Renee, guilty of accessory to assault and theft. Sentence: 5 years in prison and $10,000 restitution to be paid directly to me. The court also granted a permanent restraining order. None of them could contact or approach me or my children ever again. When the judge concluded, I felt a wave of relief so powerful that tears spilled down my cheeks. The lawyer turned to me and whispered, "You're free now, Marion." A few weeks later, the state returned the recovered lottery ticket. I signed the paperwork, claiming the $750,000 that had once nearly cost me my life. But as I held the official check in my hands, I didn't think of the money. I thought of survival, of strength, of the mother I had become. For the first time in a long time, I could finally breathe. When the dust of the trial finally settled, I found myself standing in front of my parents' old house, the one I had avoided for so long. The paint was faded, the porch creaked under my feet, and yet it felt like home again. With the lottery money now legally mine, I decided to rebuild not just the house, but the life I had almost lost. The first thing I did was renovate the place. I hired a small local crew, replacing the broken porch steps, painting the walls a soft cream color, and turning my parents' old bedroom into a nursery. Every sound of hammering and painting felt like healing, like I was stitching together the pieces of my past. The twins' cribs sat by the window, sunlight spilling across their faces each morning. Watching them sleep, I whispered, "This is your grandfather's house, your grandmother's love, and our new beginning." The next thing I did was invest in myself. With part of the money, I officially registered my Etsy business under the name Marion's Little Miracles. I upgraded my equipment, bought a new sewing machine, and even hired a part-time assistant, a single mother like me who needed work from home. My shop grew faster than I ever imagined. Orders poured in not just from Charlotte, but from all over the country. Moms would message me saying, "Your designs carry warmth. They feel like hope." And I'd smile, knowing they had no idea just how true that was. I also set aside a college fund for both my sons, a promise that no matter what happened, their futures would never depend on anyone's mercy. Every dollar I spent was thoughtful, every decision made with gratitude. Sometimes, I'd take the boys out in their stroller to the park nearby. The same streets where I once walked with pain and fear now felt safe again. Neighbors would wave, not knowing my story, just seeing a young mother smiling with her twins. And honestly, that was enough for me. I didn't need them to know what I had survived. It was enough that I had survived. At night, when the house was quiet, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea, looking up at the stars. I'd think of my parents and whisper, "I made it, Mom."
Dad.
"Your girl didn't give up." The wind would move softly through the trees, and in those moments, I could almost feel their presence, proud, peaceful, watching over me and my sons. My life had started again, not from what I'd lost, but from what I had chosen to become. A year later, life looked nothing like the broken memories I once carried. The seasons had turned gently, and Charlotte's streets were alive with the hum of new beginnings. My twins, now walking with unsteady steps, filled the house with laughter that healed even the quietest corners of my heart. Each giggle, each tiny word, was proof that pain could be rewritten into joy if one dared to survive long enough. My Etsy business had grown beyond my dreams. Marion's Little Miracles was now more than a small online shop. It had become a symbol of hope for other women like me. I started teaching free weekend classes for single mothers who wanted to start their own small businesses. Watching their faces light up when they sold their first item reminded me of the day I mailed mine, that spark of possibility that can change a life. Sometimes, when I walked into the nursery, I'd catch sight of the framed check on the wall, the one worth $750,000. I kept it there not to show wealth, but as a reminder. That piece of paper wasn't about money anymore. It was about everything I endured to protect what was truly priceless. My sons would one day ask about it, and I'd tell them, that check didn't save us. Love did, courage did. News eventually reached me that Darren, Norma, and Renee were serving their sentences quietly. There were no apologies, no letters.
And I didn't need them.
Forgiveness wasn't my goal. Peace was. Knowing they could never hurt me or my children again was all the closure I needed. Every evening, after putting the twins to bed, I'd step outside with my tea and breathe in the calm night air. The same sky that once witnessed my pain now watched over my peace. I'd whisper to the stars, "We made it." I had lost everything once, parents, safety, and faith. But I had rebuilt it all, piece by piece, through strength I didn't know I had. My name was Marion, and my story wasn't one of tragedy anymore. It was a story of rebirth. As I looked at my sleeping sons that night, I smiled and whispered the words that had carried me through it all. "You are my miracle, both of you. And together, we are free." Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories.